All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. My name is Jatera McGee. I'm an investigative reporter and an anchor at WPXI, the NBC affiliate in Pittsburgh. And I also chair the NABJ Investigative Task Force. So we are all about creating opportunities like this one, where you can network, where you can get professional development and learn how to be a better investigator, whether it's in your title or not. So today we are in for a real treat. I'm so excited about the panel that we have, investigations for social, TikTok, Instagram, and whatever's next. Levi Ismail joining us all the way from Nashville. And if you could start with how you got into this space and then give a little brief introduction.
Sure. Well, I'll start with what I do. I'm an investigative reporter here in Nashville. I work for the, prestigious, News Channel 5 investigative unit. And it's been a pleasure, just being able to learn from some of the best out here. But, about 4 years ago, I talked to one of my good friends here in Nashville who has nothing to do with news whatsoever. And he said, whenever you're working on these stories, you come, back and you talk to me about how, this was happening and that was happening, and oh, you wouldn't believe all of this. He's like, they've got this new thing called TikTok. I'm sure they would appreciate hearing about this information the way that I would. And I thought, there's no way, like that doesn't make any sense. Why would I, venture into that territory? I've got enough to do with work. Um, and at the time, I was doing general assignment work, but I realized that this was a perfect opportunity to be able to share with people what it looks like when you're on the scene of something, or tell someone about a story that you've been developing over the past however many weeks or months. And so that's what I started doing, and the response has been incredible.
One of the things that I love is that when so many of us get our first job and we're trying to sound like a news reporter or a news anchor, the advice that a lot of us get is to act like you're talking to your grandma or act like you're talking to your friend. And that's what you're actually doing. Sometimes you're talking to your friend James, your roommate,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're just talking to the audience, but it feels like so connected. I've seen some of the comments on your post of people saying, I feel like you're talking directly to me. I feel like we're friends.
Well, and that's the point is, if we can't do this right, I don't know how we can connect with a number of people out there, telling stories that impact thousands of folks, maybe even more. They all want to know that whatever you're talking about matters to them. And I've I've found ways to be able to relate to people even before they know what the story's about. Some people have no idea what the story's about, and then they find out. But in the meantime, they're sitting there and they're having what they feel like is a conversation with you, even though it's one-sided. I'm the one talking. But the more the more they watch these videos, the more they feel like they're connected to a sense of community. And that's ultimately what we've been doing for TV, on TV for the longest time, is that we report, people watch, they fall in love with whoever they're watching, and they want to come back. Well, what happens when you take that to different platforms? That's what we're trying to accomplish.
I love it. Before you start your presentation, as we were planning this webinar, one of the things that we were debating is what we call it, because it was a matter of if TikTok was still going to be allowed in the US when we had this panel tonight. When you first heard the news or when you first realized, okay, this ban actually might happen, what was going through your head? And has that changed the way you're thinking about the time and the effort you're putting into that space?
I had people sending me text messages, sending their condolences over TikTok. And I thought, why? Like that doesn't need to be because for them, they thought, well, you're the TikTok reporter, right? You're the guy who does the news on TikTok and everything. So it makes sense that you would be upset or frustrated or whatever. And I've tried to remind people, like, this is a tool, this is a tool like anything else out there. There are people that make a living off of this. And for them, I totally understand their frustrations. But for me, I've used it as a tool to help amplify and to help supplement my work. And so you may see me on air twice out of the week. You may see me once, you may not see me at all. But there's no loss there when people see me in different ways and different platforms, and they feel like, oh yeah, I caught you just the other day on a story. I may have shot that video 4 weeks ago, but it still lives on
Yeah.
because we posted it on these platforms, and now people feel like they're informed, even if it was weeks ago. So it's for me, it's become an invaluable resource uh, because I can talk about things in an evergreen way without it having to have happened today. Like I can talk about stories. Like I have stories and videos that I've shot, weeks ago, and I'm
Mm.
probably going to post them this week, maybe next. They're still going to feel relevant because it was written that way, it was shot that way, and it was told that way. So I think that's what these platforms can offer us is a different way to get the message out there, whatever the story might be.
Sure. Levi, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we'll get started with your full presentation. And as we're talking, if anyone has questions, you can put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring, but after the presentation's over, we will allow plenty of time for people to ask some questions because I'm sure you will have many.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, well, first off, thank you guys, for tuning into this. You see the title right there, Investigations for Social. This is something that I think a lot of people in our industry work on the social media side of things, but not too many people take advantage of the idea that you can put yourself on screen and talk about some of these stories that you're working on and not have it not just be a one-off story. It can be multiple stories, that you're covering. And so that's something that I try to that I myself am trying to do a better job of. Instead of the one home run, we do a bunch of singles, base single here or there, and we get the story out to as many people as possible, as often as possible, and in the end, have some real impact. So move to the next. So as we just mentioned, the title, it's right there. This is about more than TikTok. This is about a way of storytelling that many of us are already doing. It's just about changing the way that we think about doing these stories, changing the way that we think about presenting these stories. I mentioned there, I want to make sure that we get our work in front of as many people as possible because that's how we have impact. And, TikTok is one way of doing that. But it's not the only way. I to this day I use TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, uh, and Patreon, to get all this stuff out there. Some people they'll follow one thing or another. Some people will follow all of them. But it's very interesting with TikTok. It's become kind of like a search engine of sorts. Like just last week, I know I'm not the only one who's had a boss say, "Hey, have you checked TikTok to see if there's any video of what just happened?" That's this is something that didn't exist a few years back, but now we're doing so because in many ways people will turn there first for video of what they may have seen around town or what happened because they feel like they're going to get the authentic version of that. It's not going to be too pre-produced or anything. They're going to get what happened, and it's most likely going to be shot by amateurs. Unfortunately, people trust amateurs more than they trust the people who are paid to do this for a living. But that's part of why I want to make sure that more of us are in these spaces. And so why vertical video? Vertical video, and you're not going to hear the sound for this video down there, but it's just an example. Everyone is turning to vertical video for a reason. They saw what TikTok did and they said, I want to replicate that model. There's no coincidence that shortly after TikTok's success, we saw Instagram say that they're going to prioritize Reels. And now everyone's posting Reels rather than posting just photos. And it's because of the TikTok effect. How many of you watch a video horizontal anymore on your phone? Very few people do. And when you do so, you are committed. You are committed to that video. You're watching and you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. You know what you're getting into. With vertical, you think about your phone in your hand. It's almost like a remote control, right? And people are quick to flip. one video after another after another. And so it's super important to make sure that you catch people's attention as soon as possible before they move on to the next thing. And that's the 5-second rule, right? That's where, and the thing about it is that we have a 5-second rule when it comes to broadcast. We write up anchor intros and we say, okay, we need to put the most important, the most engaging thing first. That's why, one of the best lessons I learned in I've been doing this 12 years in this industry. Best lesson I've learned, you write the anchor intro first, okay? Not the package, the anchor intro, because that's where you are getting people engaged into why they should watch the rest of your story. Same deal here, no different. I would venture a guess to say that 5-second rule is becoming 3-second rule pretty soon here. Attention spans are very quick and people are quick to move on to the next thing. But that said, a compelling story, you could have something in 30 seconds, 10 seconds. You could have something as long as 4, 5, 6 minutes long. As long as you have that hook in the very beginning to get people interested in whatever else you have to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show 3 examples of vertical videos that I put together. Now, I'm going to do kind of rapid fire, one after another, but I will leave room, so if you want to make sure that you take notes, while you're watching these videos so that you can ask questions after the fact, that would probably work best. But I'm going to show some videos and I want you to keep in mind what are the things that we just talked about that were applied in these videos. That make sense? All right.
The now former police chief you're about to hear from was accused of helping someone buy their way into becoming a cop.
Is it worth me giving a reserve commission to somebody who is going to say, we'll put his hours in and get essentially $200,000 worth of cameras?
The man who was on the other end of that line sent us this recorded phone call of former Millersville Police Chief Dustin Carr. What we hear is Carr considering an offer that was made by Nashville entrepreneur Jack Bird III for license plate readers. These are the things that cops use to tell if there's like a stolen vehicle in some other jurisdiction.
So Jack has offered to donate LPR cameras to our city.
In exchange, Bird, who is not a certified officer in the state of Tennessee, would get a commission card, essentially making him a reserve officer from Millersville. He can arrest you, he can pull you over under the umbrella of Millersville Police, all of these things.
I don't hand out commission cards. I don't. And I told him that. I'm adamant against it. But with that being said, there's some things you got to really consider.
Carr's attorney said that they're not commenting. As for Bird, he turned down our interview request this time around, but listen to what he said the first time I asked him about buying commission cards.
Absolutely not. That is not something that we would ever support.
We reached out to a police consultant who said that either way, this raises a lot of questions.
That's where the ethical issue comes up. Is it a quid pro quo or someone in the community that wants to help out local police departments?
So here's what we know. Millersville never got these LPR cameras, but Bird did get the reserve position. Carr stepped down as Millersville police chief not long after that and ended up working for Bird's security company, Solare and Risk Management. Earlier this year, we sent our findings to the Post Commission here in Tennessee. Those are the ones who regulate police. Turns out the day before they sent their investigator over to Millersville, Bird resigned from his position. Now, we don't know if there was ever anything exchanged between Bird and the city of Millersville for him to actually get this reserve position. What we do know is that during this time, Millersville's police chief, their assistant police chief, their city manager all worked for Bird's Solare and Risk Management company. I think some of them still work for Solare. Now keep in mind, these are the same people in charge of making sure that Bird does the required training to keep the job. No charges have been filed against anyone in this case, but we do know that the state agency in charge of security guards across the state does have an open investigation on Bird. As always, we want to know, what do you think? The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has just raided the Millersville Police Department.
We watched as TBI agents executed a search warrant issued by a local judge.
And so while they're running investigation out there, we're actually outside of Assistant Police Chief Sean Taylor's home, where TBI is also searching. I'm going to give you a look right now as to what we see. There is one TBI vehicle out front, and we believe there's about 7 others in the back there. They've pulled out some documents. They've had them in their hands. But what I understand is that there are a number of electronics that might be searched. What we do know is that TBI has been paying close attention to some of what Sean has been saying, whether it's online or in person.
We'd like to talk to you about some of your conspiracy theories.
All right, well, have a good day. All of this comes amid questions raised by News Channel 5 Investigates about the town's assistant police chief and his sometimes bizarre conspiracy theories.
For example, like when he said that he believed the Covenant School shooting was staged.
3 of us know something's not right. It doesn't pass a smell test.
Or how all of these Tennessee politicians were somehow tied to a child trafficking ring.
I'm digging into the child trafficking.
Authorities have confirmed that the TBI is investigating the potential misuse of sensitive law enforcement data as Taylor has pursued those theories.
We know that Taylor teamed up with a nonprofit group called Veterans for Child Rescue.
But after News Channel 5 Investigates obtained secret recordings from that sting, it is now the focus of a probe by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Those recordings show volunteers from Veterans for Child Rescue like Kim Kelly were the ones posing as the minor, even though state law says it has to be law enforcement.
Yes, you can get my number. Yes.
But when the case went to court, this man, Detective Ty Doris, testified that he and a fellow detective were actually the ones doing the chatting.
And the other detective actually did all the typing and all the data entry. Yes, sir.
Well, a Millersville City Commissioner tells me he hopes this raid will be the beginning of an effort to restore sanity in the town he calls home. The fact that the TBI is here, does that give you hope?
It gives me a lot of hope, and I'm glad they're here. Maybe we get answers for the people of this city.
I don't say this lightly. This diary is one of the most graphic, disturbing things that I've ever read. Not the manifesto, the diary. Manifesto is about 52 pages. Diary is about 288. Now, before I say anything else, I just want to make sure one thing is clear. This is not about trying to glorify Solomon Henderson in any way, shape, or form. This is about understanding and transparency. That said, I'm only sharing some of his writings. This diary included things like bomb-making instructions, so I think we can all understand why I'm not showing this thing in its entirety. But Henderson documented this attack. He showed photos of himself in the bathroom with this gun. He shared video of himself in school with this same gun in his backpack. All of that happened just moments before the attack that hurt one student and killed 16-year-old Diana Escalante, someone who he did not know. I'm going to say that one more time because I think there's been some confusion over this issue. Solomon did not know Diana. Diana's family confirmed as much when they told us that they never heard of Solomon before any of this. They believe that Diana just happened to be in the cafeteria when Solomon opened fire. I was hoping to get some answers from this 288-page diary, and while I did get some, I hope you understand that we're talking about a 17-year-old black student who hated being black, so much so that he found a sense of community and belonging with white supremacists online. He wrote things like, "I wish I was white," and self-hating N-word award goes to with a picture of his eyes. There are a lot of questions, and many of you have asked these questions because it just doesn't make sense. I thought I'd seen the worst, having read the Covenant School shooters' writings. The difference with Solomon's writings, they're not just words on paper. His first diary entry begins back in October and goes all the way until just hours before the attack. And in those pages, okay, they're filled with Nazi symbols, pictures of Solomon doing the white power salute, and graphic photos of mass killers after they carried out their attacks and turned the guns on themselves. And I know it's not easy hearing these things. Believe me, it's not easy saying them. But this is what we're dealing with. This kid was radicalized, and not just by white supremacists. He idolized mass killers.
Given how desperate you are for understanding and connection, I think most of us in our own nature would resort to something like an online community.
Lauren Ruth Martin is a licensed professional counselor over at Novel Counseling. I talked to her because I was trying to make sense of how someone who seemingly appears normal could go from active student to active shooter.
That A to B that you're asking about, I think there becomes a level of overwhelm hopelessness, desperation, and lack of resources that then can push somebody to that angle.
You know, a lot of people asked, where were the parents? This kid had a very bad relationship with his family. There's a lot of mention of abusive behavior. Now, I haven't talked to the family or anything like that quite yet, but I can tell you Solomon said he considered killing them after we hear about his family. Solomon talked about how he wanted to carry out his attack at the cafeteria where he expected to see the most number of students, but he also made a note of saying on a certain day he could expect to see the most number of minority students. So while I don't think that Solomon specifically targeted Diana and another student, I do think that just based on the writings, he was thinking about minority students. Now, even if that was the case, this is someone who very clearly wanted to cause the most amount of damage as possible. He even said that he wanted to kill at least 10 people because that was more than another school shooter he read about online. This is something that Solomon thought about for months, but he also, toward the end, began to spiral. He wrote things like, "I'm slipping." His grades were falling. There was a court date that he was worried about. And so one day he just writes, "All right, tomorrow's the day." He didn't know if he was going to be able to end his life, but he knew that whatever he did not want to end up in jail. I think there are a lot of nuances in this case, but I also think that it's an important conversation to have. Solomon found community in the worst places. Maybe there's a way to reach out to these teens before it's too late.
Not humanizing him, but what we're using is this information to better inform how we can see people, how we can help people, how we can make our communities safer.
Now, I wanted to make sure I used those examples there because those were all based off of investigative stories that aired maybe a day earlier or a couple days earlier, you know? And so there's no, in these social media platforms, there's no expectation that whatever just happened has to be on there immediately. And I think that's part of, you know, our news mind is that we think, okay, well, it just happened. We need to report on it. We need to put it on as soon as possible. And that's where we can run into issues with being, let's be honest, overwhelmed with a lot of things. I did the first story weeks after we initially talked about it. And the second and third story, those were a couple days later. Okay. But I share this next slide because I want people to also think about offering depth in these videos. They can be, like, believe it or not, I have done shorter videos. This is, I used examples of longer videos because I want people who are doing the investigative work to know, like, you can take what you've done and apply it to these platforms and just explain everything. There's no runtime. You can take your time as long as you explain the hook immediately and then elaborate. What we've done.
I think one of the things that's so impressive too is showing the pieces that your unit has done on the Millersville officers, and all of the drama that has followed. How long have you all been working on those stories at this point? Over a year?
Millersville stories. I started working on Millersville the year I showed up here, 2020.
Oh.
And they started. I mean, it's been one issue after another with one administration after another. And just last year, I started working on those stories with my colleague, Phil Williams. Mm-hmm. And so I had certain angles, he had certain angles, and every once in a while, those angles would intersect. The one story that we just saw, Phil was nowhere near me when I was putting this video together. But I was on the scene on one side covering the assistant police chief having his home raided. He was at the police station covering the police station being raided. And after I had shot what I needed to shoot outside that home, I went back, grabbed, Phil and said, "Hey, this is what I found, but also let me get that video." And he's like, "Absolutely." So he shared his story. I put it together with mine. I went into the studio here and did a stand-up video where I just explained, here's my angle, but also I'll fill in the blanks for Phil's angle as well.
And these are pieces on TV that might be, especially those of us who have watched Phil Williams' work know, they might be 5, 6 7 minutes sometimes.
Oh, easily.
And you're able to turn it into what is long for TikTok or Instagram, but it's not long for TV.
People will tune in. Believe it or not, people want to be informed just as much as they want to be entertained. And they will find the information someplace. It just depends on if it's coming from a journalist or not. And that's where I want to make sure, like, we put these stories out there because they impact people in, who are watching it on TikTok too. They impact that community as well. So it makes sense, when we do something on air to also find a way to complement that everywhere else. I will keep going. Unless you have another question.
Nope, you're good to keep going.
Okay, perfect. So as I was talking about depth, this is a story that we started working on back in December. Tennessee State University. There were a number of issues regarding HBCUs being underfunded by their states across the country. All these different states and these governors got letters saying, hey, you've underfunded this HBCU this amount of money. Well, Tennessee State University, they were looking at $2.1 billion of underfunding over the past 30 years. So I did a video on TikTok and Instagram before I did a video on air. So we already had some of the reporters' general assignment working on air for this story. And then I thought, well, this feels like something that we need to amplify. We need to get in front of more people. So I did the one story on TikTok and Instagram. And sure enough, it's ballooned into all of this, where as soon as we get an update, people are going to our social media pages saying, okay, what did Levi and them say about this? We got all of these different interviews because people were finding the story elsewhere and they were sharing it with their friends, alumni organizations, what have you. So you may think, okay, well, it's the one video. Well, no, the one video is just the start. That's just the beginning. You can turn it into any number of things, and it doesn't have to feel like you're trying to cram everything into a 5-minute video on air. Well, what if someone told you, like, oh, don't worry about the time, just tell us what you've learned. This is where you can do that. And we did the same thing over at Millersville. This thing started as one investigation on this one cop with Phil Williams, and it turned into me talking about him on multiple different occasions, on multiple different videos, even though he was doing one side of the story and I was doing a completely different side. We found ways to intersect through this. And it doesn't have to be only your stories. I work with Phil on stories. I work with some of my other colleagues on stories. I present some of my colleagues' stories on these platforms if they don't have the time. If I feel like more people need to hear about this, I'll be that guy. And it's helped to build my brand as a result. Now, as far as the impact is concerned, the results speak for themselves. I mean, I was once that guy who said TikTok is only for the dancers. That's for the dancers and the people who can dance well and the lip syncers. That's all what it's for. And then eventually people began to follow and said, hey, we want more of this. And so that's what happened. People showed up and they left feedback. They told us, thank you for offering this local content. We appreciate having journalism out here in these spaces. Other people tagging us, like tagging this thing that I created out of thin air, which is Nashville News, and with CBS News and Washington Post, NBC News, whatever it might be. I mean, the feedback was incredible, and it goes beyond that. Is people started stitching these videos to share with their communities and add their own feedback and their own commentary. TikTok is unique in that way, where it gives people that opportunity to do stuff like this. But I had no idea until someone told me at one point, like we were doing this for months, and someone at one point said, I think people are stitching this stuff. I was like, what do you mean? And I saw it and I noticed, oh my God, there are people literally taking the story that you did and they're applying their own commentary. Sometimes, well, more often than not, good. But sometimes, it gets a little dicey. But at the same time, like, hey, listen, we invite feedback. We invite people to chime in because this is a part of being in this community, is that some people are going to appreciate it for certain stories. Other people are going to say, nah, that's not for me. And I want to let you know it's not for me. But all of that, we've been talking all about branding, and I want to make sure, something is clear. I'm not asking people to be me. I'm not, that's not what this is about. I'm not saying you need to create your own Nashville News or create your own Levi type of videos. What I'm saying is understand that you are a brand, okay? Even though we have our connections, obviously, to one station or another, you ultimately are a news leader in your community. And you can be more of a news leader by being in some of these different places where people can recognize you. And they say, yeah, that's my news guy. Where else is he? Where else can I find him? Oh, he's also on News Channel 5. Okay, great. That's my station now. If you've ever watched the movie Air, okay, this is about the courting of Michael Jordan, with all these different shoe companies coming around. The shoe company that ultimately won out is the shoe company that let him be himself. And that's a message not just for the reporters, that's a message for the managers as well. It's like, you don't want just another athlete, on the roster who can do the same thing everyone else is doing. You want to be able to find someone who is uniquely themselves. And that's what Jordan was. So I wrote, Be Like Mike. My friend Ben Hall, he is a investigative journalist at News Channel 5 as well. And he told me, hey, Levi, I want to do this thing. I want to do this TikTok thing. But one caveat, I don't want to show my family. I don't want to show where I'm going on vacation. I don't want to show my house. I just want to stick to the stories. And so we sat around and I was like, I get that. We can absolutely do that because the substance is your gimmick. And he's like, yes, that makes perfect sense. I'm going to be the reporter for certain issues. And so there are stories that he reports on, whether it's children's services or, mental health help. Those are kind of his lanes. That's what he sticks to. Any one of you can do the same. And Ben is, he'll be the first to tell you he is not good on the spot with just a camera being put in his face. But I say it over and over again. Ben is one of the best to do it with just very little, pre-production and all that kind of stuff, because he's just talking to you about what he's covering. And many of us do that already. It's just, we can do it in this capacity. So a few notes, as I said, show your personality. It's okay. I write everything that the majority of everything I say on camera. I've written it out. Maybe they are notes, or maybe it's an entire script, but I will go line for line, read it, digest it, say it out loud, and then get to the point where I can say it without looking down at my paper or whatever it might be. It's writing like you talk, but I also don't say things to try and get people back to TV. It's not about, I'm going to give you a small amount of information. Oh, and by the way, if you want to see the real story, check out, what I'm doing tonight at 6:00. That doesn't work, because the person who's going to watch this video is watching it 5 weeks from now. They feel like they didn't get anything out of it now. So this is a way to complement what you're doing on air. So it's okay to say things like, give them the full story and then say, we're doing more of this. We're covering more of this issue on News Channel 5. I'll have updates as often as possible. I'll bring it here, but I'll also have it on air. So you can catch me there too. That seems to work out really well for us. I talked about writing the evergreen scripts, but I also want to mention, once again, this is why TikTok has been so great for me, is that I can put something together put a video together that I won't post on there for weeks, you know, or I may think about putting together a video where, you know, it just comes to me, an idea comes to me, and I'm like, gosh, I missed that story weeks ago, but I feel like there's an update with this. Maybe I can put the two together and present it. Okay, well, I'll do that. But I'm never going to make it seem like you missed out on what happened weeks ago or you missed out on what just happened 5 hours ago. This is a continuous story. This is something that you are a part of. And if you're talking to your friends, you wouldn't say, oh, yeah, that happened 6 weeks ago, but it's really important. You should really, no, you would just say, hey, you want to hear something I found really interesting? And explain the rest. TikTok is really good with that. Instagram, you're looking at more timely, you know, and more visual stories. So I say, you know, not all videos work on all platforms. And I mean that because I think there are videos that work really well for TikTok, stuff where it's less produced, things where, you know, you're really just talking to people. They feel like it's more authentic. Whereas Instagram, they love seeing the visuals. You start with whatever the crazy visual of that, you know, armed robbery was, or that crazy fire or something like that. That gets people's attention, but it also needs to be timely. And with YouTube, they love long form storytelling. So what I just showed you could be 3 minutes, 8 minutes, could be 30 minutes. They'll take it as long as it has the hook. They will they'll appreciate what you have to offer.
One quick question on that, Levi. Someone put
Absolutely.
in the chat, and you sort of alluded to it there, but do you create different versions of your videos for each of those social media platforms?
You know, I used to, and I used to do more of it, I should say. I used to do more of it before, where I might make a shorter version for an Instagram, or I might get to the point quicker for Instagram because I really want to show this compelling video. Whereas TikTok, it's okay for me to just kind of start and talk, even though I give you the hook. The hook might stay the same, but I can just feel free to talk about something. And I find that lately, TikTok has been more receptive to people just talking as opposed to a ton of different cuts or whatever. So yeah, I have done it in the past. Nowadays, I just try my best to make it apply to make all of them work as much as possible so that I save myself the time and effort. But yeah, that is something to keep in mind. The other thing about this is, can you watch a video without sound? I think that's super important. Can you, you know, like I add the captions there so you can read it. I have the title in the beginning, in that video right there in the middle, you see what the title is, you know what you're getting into. So even if my introduction isn't quite as straightforward, I can still have the text on screen to make sure you understand what it is we're talking about. And then I don't know about you guys, but I often find myself in a place where I probably don't have a headphones or something. So, but I still want to see the video. And that's where I can sit there, follow along, and not have to have the audio. Right. So I think it's really important. It's one of the two things that I try to implement in every video is make sure you have that. So if someone lost what you were about to say in the very beginning, they could still at least read what the story's about and then follow along with the script. Few things that I do, I use my camera, my phone for the majority of the stuff that I shoot, and I will shoot in 60 frames per second, you know, with the back camera. I know it's very tempting for people to want to use the front camera because then you can see yourself, but the back camera has all those fancy lenses for a reason. It's going to make you look much better. And you have to kind of trust that the video is going to come out better. Okay. I also use a microphone. I have a DJI mic, one with me right now, but I use a microphone because just hearing you is super important as well. If the audio sounds a little off, people are quick to swipe. They're gone in a heartbeat. Um, I'm showing an example right there of how I download B-roll from YouTube. Okay, so I will go to my News Channel 5 station's YouTube page and I will grab video, whether it's mine or stuff from, my colleagues with their blessing, of course. And that's how I can put together stuff that you've seen. I'm trying to do less, pre-production and all that kind of stuff, because I think it's important to just feel like we're having a conversation as opposed to having it feel more like TV. But I do incorporate these things because I think that visual media is very important to what we're doing and what I'm trying to explain. Like, there are a number of people out there who will, create these videos and put their commentary on it and whatnot, and it just misses the mark. The video doesn't match what they're saying. What they're saying doesn't match the video, vice versa. But we do this for a living, and so if you've got a story that you've done, grab the story, use that as an example. Explain why people were running out of out of that building or whatever. But also show it. So that's why I grab some of those videos, and sometimes I'll just ask my photographer, hey, do you have the video? Sure, I'll incorporate that. I also use CapCut, which is great for editing, but I also use Final Cut Pro as well. If it's not abundantly clear, I did the majority of my career was spent as an MMJ, and so I enjoy putting together stories, and it just happens that now I have an opportunity to use all of those skills in a different way than I expected, but in a way that makes sense. And when I'm shooting these things, God, that's just, oh, okay. I was going to say that's just a terrible screenshot of me. It's a video. Okay. There are times where I will try and knock out these videos, maybe 3 of them at a time. Okay. Just to make sure that I'm using my time as efficiently as possible. And what we talked about before is that if you're doing this right, it can apply to horizontal video. It can apply to what you put on air. All you have to do is make sure you've got the hook and you can explain from there. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that in a conversational way. I shot these things horizontally so that I can post them on YouTube, and then I can trim them down to TikTok or Instagram. Okay. I can do 1 report. I can do 3 or 4. And the station loves it because sometimes I'll give them this and they'll put it on air. It's no different, right? It's just, there's no real script per se because I'm just kind of explaining what you see. But from what I found is that it's a great way to develop the conversational tone. It's a great way to, I guess, get as much content out there as possible to all of these different platforms. And what happens when you create that? You start realizing that you can do even more. And that's what we did in this case. We developed an entire special, Emmy-nominated special, off of the same type of concept. I said, why can't we just have myself, my colleagues, and talk about the story that we've been talking about, which is the mental health system and the revolving door with people being arrested for certain crimes and then going right back on the streets because we don't have a place to put them. So I realized I was working on a story for that. My colleagues were working on different stories. I said, why don't we just put it all together? Like, why don't we just sit and talk about this stuff? So we found different spaces to do so, and that's what we did. This right here aired on News Channel 5 as a 30-minute special off of the same concept that we presented earlier. And then what you saw on the right here was a vertical video that I put together based on that to explain to people like, hey, this thing is going to air tonight at 6:30. If you don't catch it there, you can find it on our website and watch the rest. That's one way of trying to incorporate broadcast as much as possible. But all of that to say, folks, if it's watchable on digital, it's probably watchable on broadcast too. So this is not as I said in the very beginning, this is not a how do I make TikToks presentation. This is how do I take what I'm already doing and apply it to a vertical format, horizontal format, whatever, and get more eyeballs on the work. This is one way that I found to be very successful, and I'm glad I found it. But in the words of Nike, folks, sometimes you just got to do it. Okay, there's all the lessons and all these things that you can learn and take notes from, but unless you start by just sitting in front of the camera and talking about your story, whatever it might be, you're just putting off that day for as long as possible. I genuinely believe that at some point or another, we're all going to be asked to do this in some capacity. I'm just doing it sooner.
And doing it well. If you all have questions for Levi, please go ahead and leave them in the chat and we'll move into some Q&A. And Levi, I have a few questions for you too, but first I just want to say, great job. I always tell you great job. But I mean, the ability that you have to adapt what you're learning on social media to what you're putting on TV for viewers and the way that you're walking them through stories is incredible. And I think that one of the reasons that viewers are so, or social media users love your content so much is because you're taking the same principles of good journalism, strong storytelling, really compelling video, and putting it on their phones, on platforms that maybe they're not used to seeing that as often. So kudos to you. Can you talk a little bit about, I know a lot of people watching this are thinking like, okay, well, I'm turning 2 packages a day, or I'm turning 3 investigations a week, or I don't know how I could possibly incorporate this into what I'm already doing. What's the average amount of time that you're spending on one video?
Oh, that's the question I hate.
Gotta ask it.
Well, no, and that's perfectly fine. You know what's wild is that I've had videos where I am literally just in front of the camera, no B-roll, just me talking. There might be some quick edits here or there, and they outperform the video I spent 6 hours working on. So it really varies, but honestly, I could tell you that I probably spend about 3 to 4 hours a video. That makes sense. And that's on the conservative side of things. Because at this point I've established that, okay, this is what you can expect from me. It's not just me speaking on camera. I'm going to show you the visuals and I'm going to be doing the editing myself. So that takes time, but I also write this stuff out and that takes even more time. I will sit in front of a phone, okay, recording myself for about 20, 30 minutes, trying to make sure that I got what I needed on camera. And then from there, I'll piece it together. So I'm assuming the next question will be, where are you doing this? But the thing is, the majority of what I'm doing is done at home. And I know that sounds weird and people don't want to hear that. But think about how much time you spend on Twitter or on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, YouTube. Think of how much time we spend on those platforms watching other people's content. I don't spend that much time watching other people's content. I'm spending the majority of it creating my own. And I'm very fortunate here to work in a station where they understand the value, and they're willing to say, okay, you put some stories on air this week. Take some time to, try and verticalize that. And that's what I'll do. I did that not yesterday, the day before. And, there are going to be days during the week where I can put some time aside during work to get that done, but also I'll do it on my own time.
On that same note, someone asked if you create content for your station's social media pages or if they use those same videos that you've already posted or plan to post.
Yes. So I will take certain videos and put the News Channel 5 graphics on there and post it on the News Channel 5 Instagram page or, Twitter page, Facebook, whatever that might be. But there are certain videos that I keep to myself because I know that it doesn't have any News Channel 5 content on there. And maybe I'm talking about something that I haven't been reporting on. Those are videos. And I'll be honest, I create a lot of content that is news, but I check out restaurants. I go to the new bar that opened up. I go to this event that just opened up, for the first time here in Nashville. I'll shoot video of all of that and give people a perspective of what it looks like from the lens of someone who's new to Nashville. Okay, relatively.
Complain about the snow.
I'll mess around in some snow, whatever it might be. But I'll create those videos, and it helps me because honestly, if you're only doing news all the time, it weighs on you. And so I create content that I feel good about, whether it's news or anything else. And it's no different than just trying to curate your brand of what you want to be remembered for. Do you want to be just the news guy, or do you want to be that, the person who the friend on the other side of the phone who also tells you the news?
I don't think you've mentioned this. Tell everyone how you end every video, at least on TikTok and Instagram.
Well, the majority of the videos that I put together, I end by asking, what do you think? Because I want people to engage with it. And what I find is every time I say that, people go to the comments and like, you want to know what I think? And they start typing it out, whatever it might be, good, bad, or indifferent. So I think I started saying that, but then of course, people will find me out and about someplace, like at the gym. Someone was like, hey, Levi, what do you think? Like, okay, great. That's the trademark, I guess.
That's great. Have you run into any issues with the algorithm suppressing your content because it's news, maybe specifically for Instagram or Facebook?
Not with Instagram or Facebook. I had issues with Twitter, not with Twitter, with TikTok for some time, actually. TikTok started off as the Wild West. People were just posting anything and everything. And then at some point they started, like making sure that the content was appropriate for the audiences. And so what happened is news got caught up in it, I will say. So things like I did a video about a teacher who was dragging a student through the hallway, and you see the student being dragged down the hallway, and they were like, no, that looks like child abuse. Flagged it. I said, wait a minute, that's us, that's the story, where I can post it anywhere else and I didn't have a problem. So as far as news is concerned, I haven't had a problem with Instagram saying, oh, this sounds like news, move on. It's more like some of these other platforms, they pick up on a tiny little detail of what the video might be around. Marijuana legislation, here in Nashville. I did a video on that. That video went wild for the first 15 minutes, and then it got taken down because they saw images of weed. And I said, well, but it's news. So it actually took until I had a conversation with some TikTok executives who were visiting in Nashville at the time. And I told them, I said, hey, it's in the name. I created a thing called Nashville News. I think an exception could be made. And they said, we're working on that. So now I don't have nearly as many issues, but I do often censor things like shooter, Nazi, murder, kill, that kind of thing, just to make sure that that your hard work isn't just gone with a stroke of a key.
Someone asked about Patreon specifically, and is it your own or through your station, and how is that structured, and do people pay?
That's a great question. That is something that I'm in the middle of currently. I have a Patreon account, and the Patreon account is essentially serving as a home page for a lot of the videos I create, because we didn't know what was happening with TikTok. and I didn't have everything posted on Instagram. And so I thought, okay, well, what else could we do? There's YouTube, but there's also Patreon. And so it's my Patreon page with my content that features News Channel 5. If that makes sense. So it's no different than what I created with the TikTok. It's just, this is an avenue that if you want to, you can monetize. And that's a conversation you can have with your news directors. Same conversations I'm having right now. But it's a way for you to be able to monetize your content and give people access if they pay for it. Now, I'm not necessarily charging people for stuff that they can find on TikTok or, just by going to a different platform. You have to give them something different. And that different might be a behind the scenes look. It might be a 30-minute, 30-minute podcast that you haven't posted anywhere else, like that kind of stuff. So yes, I have a page. Yes, I'm talking to the powers that be about that page. But they understand. And this is where it goes back to just, if you do the work and they see that it's not in conflict with you as a journalist and your brand and their brand, a lot of these places are going to be comfortable with you saying, yeah, I'm just showing our good work to as many people as possible. Now, if you're okay with me getting money based off of that, that's a conversation we can have. But at the very least, I'm sharing what I'm already doing.
You're doing the work on broadcast and on digital, of course, through your job. But Nashville News has now become an award-winning TikTok page. What were you all voted best TikTok in Nashville?
Best TikTok in Nashville, and then best TikTok reporter, which wasn't even a thing until they said, well, I think Levi's doing that. So
That's
they
great.
gave me an award for it.
So what happens if you were to leave your station? Do you get to keep your page? Do you own it?
I keep saying, good question. But that is a good question. Yes. I do get to keep it. And that's something that I established early on. I didn't want to call this Levi's Male News Channel 5 TV. I called it Nashville News because I wanted this to live beyond me, even if I decide I'm just going to stick with News Channel 5 and not, offer anything else to this page. It still exists, and it will continue existing beyond TikTok, beyond Instagram, beyond wherever, because what we've learned is a different way of storytelling. And while I say different, it's not different in the sense that we can't do it. Everyone's already doing it. I'm just sharing it in a different way than people expect. So I'm on their Instagram page the moment they open up the platform. There I am telling them a story. Many people, it's wild. I'll read the comments and people are like, you should do this for a living. Like, wait a minute. Or they'll say things like, oh man, I can't believe they don't put this stuff on TV. I'm like, the video is literally ripped from, you know what? Don't even bother. Like, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And it's just, it's interesting that we can see that, we understand it because we're on both sides of it. But for a lot of people that are watching this, they don't think of it as news. They think of it as, I'm being informed by a friend. And so I guess the concern might be, or, the double-edged sword is, you're walking down the street and someone says, hey, Levi, as if they know you because they've been watching these videos. But I think that ultimately, there's more good that comes out of that than bad.
Yeah. I want to get to a couple more questions, but we are at the hour mark. So if anyone has to hop off here, I just want to make sure that they know where they can find you, your handles on all your pages, and what they should do to support your work too.
You want me to tell that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Listen.
You remember all your handles.
Well, yes, yes. You can find me. I tell people all the time, I'm probably one of the easiest people in Nashville to find, unfortunately. It's pretty simple. My handle is on Instagram, Twitter, just Levi Ismail. And I have the Nashville News TikTok account, so it's just Nashville News. And I also have the Nashville News Patreon account. So all you have to do is just type in nashvillenews.co and it'll take you right to the page. You'll see all of our videos, all of our different, I probably should have led with that because it has all the other platforms on there too. You can just click on them and find us one way or another.
Cool. I'm going to get to just a couple more questions. If you
Sure.
have one, try to drop it in the chat in the next like 2 minutes and we'll try to get to it. One of the things I want to ask is we always talk about, what's too short on social media or what's too long to keep people engaged. And on TV, one of the things that a lot of investigators will tell you is if it's interesting and it's a good story, it can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. Is there a too long that you found on TikTok, on Instagram? Definitely not on YouTube.
No. I thought there was until I posted one that I thought was very long. And it's probably one of the best performing videos that I posted. I did a breakdown of what happened with Tennessee State University to get us to this point. And I posted that on my Instagram page. And I just said, listen, I've heard about what's happened. I have my colleague here who's been reporting on it. I'm just now starting to report on it. Let me just put all the information out there so you know what's going on because we're going to keep covering this. And people, like, that video was about 4 minutes and 40 some seconds long and longer than anything I had done on the story for air.
Wow.
Right? So, but it kept people engaged. It showed the historical context of how we got here. And it was in a digestible form where people could share it pretty easily. And so people were sending it everywhere. And I was, to this day, I still get people responding to that one video that was from early December, and it turned into something that I did not expect. But it became a great example for me of the fact that as long as the story is solid, as long as you have a hook there that people can relate to, as long as all of those things, those boxes are checked, it doesn't matter. I caught myself the other day watching a YouTube video that was 30 minutes long, okay, about all the video games that Rockstar came out with before Grand Theft Auto 6. So I'm watching this video, and about 10 minutes in, I stopped and I was like, there's like 20 more minutes of this, and I haven't blinked. Like, this is a video that this guy just put together, and a lot of people do the same. They expect that these videos are going to be however long because you think about it, this is the TV that we get on demand. So if it's good, people will watch. And by good, I mean, do you watch it? Could you watch this video? That's the barometer that I try to live by. Is like, would I watch this? And is it interesting to me? If that's the case, I'll post it. Doesn't matter if 10 people like it. Doesn't matter if 1 million people like it.
Last question.
Sure.
Which platforms do you think live sessions work better on? For example, live podcasts.
Ooh, nice. Okay. I've done a few different ways. I've done YouTube, I've done Instagram, and I've done TikTok. And what I found was that TikTok was easier for me to engage with people. I don't know why, it felt easier to engage with people. What I would do is I would set up my phone and it would be facing me, but I couldn't see the screen. And I would have James right next to me on the TikTok live reading questions as we go by. It worked out that way for us. Just want to make sure. Sorry. Of course, my computer's like, well, you know how long you've been on here? So, but just bear with me, guy. Okay. I think that works the best from what I've seen.
Levi, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I really appreciate this.
If we were in person, this is where I would go, Levi, Ismail, everyone, and everyone would applaud. But they're saying thank you in the chat.
Amazing.
Really appreciate your time. Excited to continue watching where your pages go. And I think this is a lot of what you talked about we can apply not just to social media, but to the journalism that we're putting on TV and on digital platforms as well. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining the NABJ Investigative Task Force. We'll be doing more sessions like this. And then we're really going big for Cleveland. So you'll see a lot of really good content in just a few months from now. So hope you all can make it. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great evening and stay safe.
Really quick, I just want to mention something. If you have any questions that I didn't get to, again, I'm not that hard to find. Any of those social media pages, whatever you find, just shoot me a comment, shoot me a question. I'm happy to answer.